showing. Thank you. All right, thank you guys, everybody, for attending. So my name is Courtney McCammon, and I would like to call to order the Malibu Environmental Review Board meeting of October 23rd, 2024. This meeting is being held by teleconference. Boards and city staff are participating from remote locations. Members of the public can participate in the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to speak during the meeting must click the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen to indicate a desire to speak after the item has been announced by the chair and must be present in the teleconference when called upon to be recognized. Once called upon, please lower your hand in the Zoom meeting to make the discussion clear for the public. Board members, if you have comments to make during this time, or during this meeting, please raise your hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and I will call on you in turn again so that we can make our discussion clear for the record and for the public. All right, so we're going to move on to item number 1, written and oral communications from staff and the board, and I believe Gail has a small announcement.
I was just reminding everyone that the ERB member meetings in November and December are on the 3rd Wednesday instead of the 4th, so we don't miss them the holidays.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gail. And for old business, I'm seeing none. That's still the case. Perfect. Okay, great. So we're going to move on to new business, item 3A, and I'm going to pass it over to Senior Planner Brooks to present on ACDP number 23-003.
Thank you, Courtney, and good morning, ERB members. This item is an administrative CDP amendment to a previously approved project located at 28465 Via Acero Street. May I have the next slide, please? Depicted here is the vicinity map showing the project location, which is located in central Malibu in the Ramirez Canyon area. Next slide, please. Depicted here is a closer view of the project site, which is bordered by Via Acero to the south, Cannon Doom Road to the to the west, vacant property to the north, and residential development to the south. May I have the next slide, please? So the site is currently under construction with the previously approved single-family residence under a separate CDP. Depicted here is the ESHA delineation that was done for that CDP. As you can see, the biologists at the time determined that there was disturbed chaparral and disturbed coastal sage scrub on the site. At which point the former city biologist determined the ESHA development standards did not apply to the project. Next slide, please. Thank you. So during construction of the residence, there was an unpermitted access road that was graded that led from Cannon Doom Road to the site of construction. When staff started taking a look at the unpermitted grading and trying to figure out the best path forward to abate the violation, it was determined that the CDP needed to be amended to capture the unpermitted grading and to restore the grading to its previously existing condition. Because that CDP did require an amendment to because the unpermitted grading required an amendment to the CDP, a more current biological resources study was required, which is what you're looking at here. With the most recent biological assessment done for the site, it was determined that there is coastal sage scrub in the area of the unpermitted grading. With that report, the biologist wasn't able to determine if the grading had a direct impact to ESHA, but there was a note that based on historical photos, there's some plant species that are consistent with the coastal sage scrub community. And in accordance with that, the project will be required to restore the area with species that are consistent with the coastal sage scrub ESHA. May I have the next slide, please? And the next couple of slides include photos of the existing site conditions. The first of which here is showing where the road was cut on the project site. Next slide, please. And this is another photo showing the road in the backdrop with the stockpiled soil in the foreground. Next slide, please. And with that, that does conclude my presentation. I believe the restoration plan that is proposed under the CDP amendment has been included with the ERB materials for this item. And I think I see the biologists, the consulting biologists are present to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renika. I really appreciate that. At this time, Gail, does the applicant have any presentations or any information that they'd like to share about this?
I don't have any presentations, but I believe they're here to talk if they would like to. And I don't see any members of the public.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gail. Does the applicant team want to present or speak at all before we open it up to ERB members? No? Okay. Okay. Well, hopefully you guys are present so that we can, if there's questions, we can ask them of you. Noah and Marnie, it seems that you guys are the ERB members today. So is there one of you that would like to go first on ERB comments?
Noah.
All right. Sure. Yeah. So my understanding of this project is that there was a violation. Now there's a restoration that is being planned, and our comments are going to be focused on the restoration plan.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So I took a look at the plant palette. The plant palette looked pretty good. I liked it. It was a lot of locally native plants, and it did not include any cultivars, which I think that's very important for restoration, to make sure not to include any cultivars and to only include locally sourced native plant material, which it looks like that's being incorporated, but I just want to make the recommendation to make sure that there's not going to be any substitutions.
Perfect. Okay.
There's hydroseed, there's container plants. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I would love to hear from the project team as far as what is their plan to make sure that we maintain survival of this restoration site, and what is the long-term management look like?
We can certainly have the applicant team answer that. There are standards that are housed within Chapter 4 of the LIP. So there are restoration standards that they have to meet, and certain years of monitoring. So I certainly don't want to take away an opportunity from the applicant team to answer that. But I did want to let you know that there are standards that we do have as a city. So yeah, applicant team, did you want to, or if the biologist, wants to speak on that, either one. I'm hearing nothing. Okay. I can pull up the restoration plan, Noah. I believe that it is housed within the biology approval as well as the restoration plan, the success standards and the long-term monitoring plan. So I'd have to pull it up if you give me a moment.
And then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I misspoke. I saw Edith Reed here, but she is not the consulting biologist. It was Greg Ainsworth, I believe, for this item. Yeah, and I don't see him on the Zoom screen.
Okay, so the biologist is not present. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then a follow-up question that I also had is the location of the was having a little bit of trouble figuring out the exact location of the restoration site. But it's kind of nearby the project. Is that correct?
It's my understanding it's in the area where the unpermitted grading occurred.
Okay,
So they'll
so,
be restoring that area with grading, and then that area will be restored. It's my
Okay.
understanding.
so, and what protection, because it's sort of close to the fuel management area for those homes, both the project home and their neighbors. So what protection do we have that the fuel management in the future won't encroach into the restoration site?
That is a great question. Let me see if there is anything. Let's see. Yeah, I do not see any measures related to the fuel mod. There is, like Courtney mentioned, the ongoing monitoring that is required under the LIP. But I don't see any specifics related to fuel modification,
So that'll be my recommendation then.
which is
Right.
to,
My recommendation will be to put in protections and maybe put some markers also out in the field to prevent any fuel modification from this property, its neighbors, or future properties that might be built in the area of encroaching into the restoration zone.
so Courtney, is there like a time frame or something? Like, I don't want to assume what the fire department
Forever.
will. I understand, but I'm just thinking logically, like the fire department is going to require what they require, but I'm wondering
Right.
if maybe there's some parameters around, within X amount of time, maybe during the monitoring year or something, so that way the area to be restored has time to establish. Like I'm just wondering, just kind of thinking out loud if, 'cause
Right. So if the area is falling into the fuel management, and maybe we can check that just to be sure, because I couldn't quite figure that out. But if it is, maybe it needs to be shifted out of it.
Yeah.
yeah, let me
Just
see. I'm sorry, go
Just
ahead.
based on where it is and I'm guessing where the house is, it looks like it might fall into zone B and C of the house that is currently being constructed.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
So that's a guess though, because as you said, it's not very clear from the
Mhm.
restoration report. So, I'm not sure. We could have them restore a different area. It's that road needs to be restored. So
So yeah, I guess we have two options. Option one is to move the restoration area outside of the fuel mod area. Option two is to plan the restoration in such a way that at maturity,
yeah,
it will comply with the standards of fuel modification for the zone that it's in.
perfect. Yeah. Right. Okay. Is there
So
one
appropriate spacing between shrubs, for example,
yeah.
the low level, the ground cover or grasses that are able to be mowed, and a stipulation of like what height, and a fuel mod plan of like, okay, how should we maintain this site going forward, and then make sure that everyone who is doing that fuel modification knows that, and also the fire department that is inspecting those fuel modifications has that plan as well.
I think, Renee could correct me if I'm wrong, I think that could be a change or a revision to the restoration plan. They could provide the approved fuel mod plan for the house and the restoration plan and merge the two. And then, as Noah suggested, make sure that it is in compliance with future fuel mod efforts after establishment. I think that could be a revision.
Yeah, so just so I'm understanding, the applicant or the owner would have to update the fuel modification plan to include the current area to be restored, so we can have now a visual of what that looks like. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, either the fuel mod plan can be updated or the restoration plan can be updated to show one or the other. It doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah,
But it needs
right.
to either be like the proposed restoration landscape plan needs to have an overlay of the fuel mod zone, or the fuel mod plan needs to have, and if they have a landscape plan, needs to
Hmm.
have, the restoration, the proposed restoration included in that, and where it falls within maybe zone B or zone C.
Mhm.
And we can, make it so that, as Noah said, the spacing, et cetera, is in compliance with that fuel mod zone requirements after establishment.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
at
I think it's-
maturity, yeah.
Yeah, at maturity, perfect. Yeah, I think it's probably easier for the applicant to update the restoration plan since they have
Mhm.
more control over that.
Yeah, okay. So Noah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to. It's along the lines of your last ERB recommendation, but, revise the restoration plan to, include the fuel mod zones and have the plants at maturity be in compliance with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
did just pull up the fuel mod plan that was approved for the house, and it does look like it falls within zone B. But we'll have that formally updated as
Okay.
part of the ERB recommendation.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Noah, any other comments?
I think that's it for me.
Okay.
Marnie?
Yeah, Marnie, do you have any comments or
No,
recommendations?
nothing to add to that. It is important that they have an updated fuel mod plan. But one thing I do want to point out, if an area on a property falls into a brush clearance zone for a contiguous property, that's a different agency. That's a different agency in the forestry department of the LA County Fire Department. So there's no way to they don't sign off on something that would affect a neighboring property. They don't review the fuel mod plans. So that's something to just discuss with fuel mod, that this is a restoration area and should show as such, I think, on the plan. And the monitoring, it looks like it's 3 years, is that correct? I mean, if that's what's in their report, I always thought it was 5.
No, it's 5. So, let me see.
In their report, it talks about 3 years, and then there's a statement about after that period, and it's rather amorphous that it will be maintained. It doesn't.
No, so in the biology approval, it states that there's an annual report, for the 5-year monitoring period, that documents the success and failure of the mitigation. Let's see, performance standards, if they're not met by the end of 5 years, it shall be extended until the standards are met. Yeah, so it is a
looking
5-year.
at the client, I'm looking at the owner's restoration and monitoring plan.
No, I understand, but I then read that and said that I put conditions on the
Oh, I
project
see. Okay,
that it has to, that is not, so we can have them change it to reflect my conditions, but my conditions override the, the restoration, and monitoring plan that they submitted.
okay, so then that would be modified to reflect your conditions before issuance of a permit.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, all right. Just so they're, aware enough of it that they change their report to reflect it. Okay,
I wanted to add that, thank you so much for that, Marnie. I wanted to also just mention, I'm glad you mentioned the brush clearance associated with zone C, because there is a vacant property immediately south of this site. at 28462 that has a proposed residence. They are currently siting the development pretty close to the northern property line. So I suspect that project would require brush clearance within the area or near the area of the restoration. So I just wanted to put that out there in case there were any additional comments or recommendations, if in fact this area would be subject to brush clearance as part of Zone C for a separate property. If that makes sense. Yeah.
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 I'm not, yeah.
And there's also an existing development as well that's pretty close to that northern property line, their northern property line, which is the southern property line of this site. So that could already be subject. Again, I don't know. I'm just looking at the aerial map and thought, okay, let me see what's existing and what I know of as a pending development. And there appears to be development either pending or existing that may have Zone C requirements within this proposed restoration area.
Maybe that's worth a discussion with field mod staff. When there's a restoration area mapped on a property and they've, you know, the restoration planting patterns have been organized to avoid future brush clearance, to find out how that can be integrated, how that can be maintained, left in that state, even though normally you would just say, no, clear the brush on the other side of the property line to protect an existing structure. Because they're, as I said, brush clearance doesn't check these plans,
Right.
Mhm,
though they are
Mhm.
part of the forestry division.
mhm.
Okay, I noted that. You mean the applicant, a discussion with the applicant and field mod staff? I just wanted to clarify.
Well, you need to get an
Or-
improved an updated field mod plan from the
Mhm.
applicant. But I think in general, it's important to understand whether or not brush clearance can override these field mod plans in the future.
Yeah,
Mm.
And if something's stipulated on a field mod plan as a restoration area and it's been approved based on the spacing that Noah was discussing, then is that the end of it? Can that be maintained in perpetuity?
right.
That's my question.
Yeah, that is
I'm not
interesting.
saying that you
And
shouldn't do the restoration. I'm just saying that it's important that it be approved specifically for what it is, I believe. If
yeah,
it's a part of, if it's mitigation, so that
Yeah.
it can, remain intact.
Renika, I wonder if you and I can look at some of the other restoration projects because for some reason, Renika and I have been on a few restoration projects as a result of, grading or brush clearance. So I wonder if, and there are a few that are in proximity to homes. So I wonder if there's something that we can look at that, maybe we've done for some of these other parcels, that can
Okay.
apply, or at least help us in this case.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the fuel mod plans that are approved for property owners will only depict the requirements on their specific site, right?
Mhm.
And so if a neighboring development has a fuel modification zone that encroaches on this site, we necessarily won't have a document to depict that because the neighboring property, that fuel mod plan is only within the bounds of that neighboring property,
Right.
right?
Field
And so,
modification is only within private property boundaries.
right,
Outside of private
right.
property boundaries, it is brush clearance.
Yeah, and
So-
so again, I think, Courtney, you're asking that we should look at other restoration plans to see how we've treated those areas when they happen to fall within a fuel modification zone.
Well, like I'm thinking of a few, yeah, well, maybe not a few, like you know, one or two that you and I have done where there
Mhm.
has been proposed restoration or we've discussed it as a result of code enforcement and they are surrounded by homes. So they do technically fall, it is, you know, they could technically fall within the fuel mod zones of other homes, but
Mhm.
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry, just going back to this specific project. So we have kind of the mitigation and restoration happening contiguously, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Is it possible to separate that? So can we restore the area that was damaged and have that restoration be low growing vegetation and somehow, you know, signed that, you know, this is a protected area, or something that can stand up to, you know, brush clearance. But the mitigation portion, maybe should be cited outside of any fuel modification zone, current or projected.
Hmm.
So it's my understanding that there isn't mitigation established because it wasn't determined if there was direct impacts to ESHA. It was more, and correct me if I'm wrong, Courtney, but it was more about the fact that the unpermitted grading happened in such close proximity to identify coastal sage scrub. And so the restoration was to not just restore the grading, the unpermitted grading, but to also put in a plant palette that was consistent with the coastal sage scrub community.
Correct.
Right. And so there weren't any direct impacts to ESHA for which mitigation was required, is my understanding.
It was basically, it was inconclusive. The
Mhm.
biologist couldn't determine if it was coastal sage scrub or not. And so it was right next to coastal sage scrub. So that's
Yeah.
why we assumed that it was likely that it
Mhm.
at least had some ESHA
Mhm.
properties and some coastal sage scrub properties. And so, you know, and again, to the code is not very clear about, you know, it's kind of, it's just an unclear project, right? So it's like it couldn't be
Mhm.
determined one way or
Mhm.
another. And so you know, as Renika said, we did want them to restore the unpermitted grading, and we felt that it was best to have them restore it with that coastal sage scrub.
Mhm.
So go
Yeah.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, so I was just thinking then, since it is, since it couldn't be determined with certainty and because of the proximity, we are assuming that there was coastal sage scrub in the area of the unpermitted grading, then it
Mhm.
sounds like the mitigation should be required, if I'm not mistaken.
That is a stance that we can take, yes. Yes, you're not wrong.
So
So the
back to Noah's,
restoration, sorry.
go ahead.
No, so the restoration, as Noah was saying, the restoration of the coastal sage scrub happens now and the mitigation happens at a later date. Post building of the home. I don't know. Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
so this is amending the underlying CDP, so it's all connected. Like we can't like final something with this being like an open-ended thing.
Mhm.
And so it sounds like the more appropriate thing to do would have the applicant team determine how they want to mitigate it, and whether it's through the payment of fees or maybe establish enough. Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud in terms of, you know, recognizing this is an amendment to the CDP,
Mhm.
right? And so we can't like close out the home and final that with this still kind of being unresolved.
Of course. Okay. I mean, it sounds reasonable to me. What you were suggesting, I don't, again, want to put words in Noah's mouth, so,
Yeah.
but it sounds reasonable to me.
Mm.
Okay.
So I
For the
want to make sure I
record.
understand. So I want to make sure I understand the recommendation. Could you just recite the recommendation related to mitigation, right? So they restore the area based on the plan that's before you, but then some effort to mitigate be also required? Okay.
Mhm.
And they can choose how they choose to mitigate.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
got it.
the mitigation should be outside of
Yes, okay. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
planned fuel modification areas
Okay.
for anybody's property, not just their own.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
We got it.
Thank
We
you so
got
much,
there.
both of
Woohoo.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Marnie.
Okay. I will just double check that there are no other comments on this project to 4865 via Acero, and if not, we will move on to the next project. Okay, Senior Planner Brooks, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you both. Thank you all.
So we will move
Thank
on to
you.
item B, CDP permit number 22058, and I will pass it off to Contract Planner Caswell.
Thank you, Connie. Good morning, everybody. Members of the ERB, thank you for joining us today. So just quick introduction. So we have for CDP number 22-058, construction of a new 1,877 square foot, 2-story single family residence, approximately 380 square foot attached garage with that, in addition to a little over 1,000 square foot basement. In addition, on-site development includes an on-site wastewater treatment system and associated development, primarily in the form of patio and attached trellis. If I could have the next slide, please. Quick overview here of the property. So you'll see its location there on the east side of Sea Level Drive. And there's a little indicator there. So there is Encinal Canyon Creek there, which is determined to be ESHA, but per the biological assessment that was performed on this property by Edith Reed, it was determined that the subject property is located outside of that 100-foot buffer area there, and so the limits of the ESHA are actually indicated by that green line within sort of approximately the center there of the map, the city's mapped ESHA. So that distance there to the subject property is 126 feet, meaning that the property is located outside of that 100-foot buffer. If I could have the next slide, please. So overview, just recap. So, a little under a 2,000 square foot, 2-story single family residence, plus attached garage and basement. The OWTS and associated development in the form of an equipment enclosure, patio and trellis. For the property or for the proposed project, there is a minor modification for approximately a 20% setback reduction to the rear yard there. Site plan review for construction above 18 feet, up to 24 feet for a gently sloped roof there. Doesn't meet the definition of a sloped roof per the LIP, which would be allowed up to 28 feet. That's why we're seeing just 24 feet here. It's effectively classified as a flat roof, given the gentle slope on it. And finally, the associated removal of one oak tree within the center of the property to accommodate that development. If I could have the next slide, please. So just looking at the on-site trees here, so that oak tree that is proposed to be removed by the project is shown in the brown graphic here. And then you'll see that on the, the west of the property, the western corner there, you'll see a dark green western sycamore. So that also is a native protected tree. However, the development has been sited outside of the protected zone, that tree, which we'll look at in the next slide. If I could have the next one, please. So in terms of on-site impacts, there is a oak tree number 1 that's shown here, that's located outside of property lines, but you'll see that the protected zone roughly there goes up to the property. There's also an aloe that's proposed to be being retained by the property owner here, but again, that's not a protected tree. So we can see here, really oak tree number 2 is going to be the only protected tree that's being impacted by the proposed development. And you can see there the canopy limits shown with the blue arrow there, the trunk obviously being in the center. And then there's the 5-foot canopy offset shown, as well as the 15-foot trunk offset. So that just gives you an idea of the protected zone for that proposed oak tree, and just what a significant portion of the site, unfortunately, that tree does take up on the property. The western sycamore, as we can see at the bottom here, so that is the protected zone there, is located outside of the development. The equipment enclosure there, the doors are shown open. Obviously, those would be cantilevered, hanging over the protected zone there. So there's not proposed to be any impact. If we could have the next slide, please. So with regard to fuel modifications, so per the approved LA County Fire Department, fuel modification was required only within the property lines here. So that's only zone A, given that the property is approximately a little under 5,000 square feet in size. So it's a very small property. So everything within 30 feet of the structure there is going to be contained within those property lines. If I could have the next slide, please. So quick summary of the impacts. So as mentioned before, the entire property is located outside of that 100-foot buffer from Escher there. Fuel mod is only being required by the LA County Fire Department within the property lines. And then removal of that one single oak tree, which meets the definition of a protected tree, is proposed to accommodate the new single-family residence. I could have the next slide, please. So applicable LIP requirements, in this case, obviously, with there being a removed oak tree, there is mitigation here that's set forth. So, you know, a native tree replacement planting program. Very often that's done with replacement trees on site with a ratio of 10 replacement trees for every 1 tree removed. Obviously, given the very limited project site that we have here, that will be challenging for the applicant, but I will let them speak to that. And then the alternative mitigation, where that's not possible, is off-site planting of a 10-to-1 ratio or the in lieu fees. If I could have the next slide, please. So essentially, staff here is looking for recommendations from the ERB for the Planning Commission with regard to mitigation for the oak tree removal. And the reason being is that per Malibu Municipal Code section 1762050, it states that when the planning manager, director, or city biologist determines a project may have potential to significantly impact the following resources, which includes sensitive species or habitats. There's no definition, unfortunately, in the LIP or MMC of a sensitive species or habitat, but it's the understanding of staff that with a protected tree, in this instance being an oak tree, that it is within the ERB's purview to make a recommendation with regard to the mitigation for that oak tree removal. With that concludes my presentation. The applicant is available here, and I don't know if they wanted to add additional comments or presentation, but I'll at that point turn over to Courtney, and then you can take it from here.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Yeah, did the applicant team want to say anything or add anything? Charles?
Looks like you're muted there.
Yes, you are muted.
Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me? Okay.
Yes.
Hey, thank you, Rick and Courtney and Marnie. So Rick did a great job summarizing the project. You can tell it's a very small lot, so we have a good team that worked closely to design the house and the septic system to fit on the site. It's not possible. There's no alternative solutions for the house without removal of oak tree number 2 because it's so large and encompasses the middle of the property. But during the review process, we also we have a drain field in the front of the property that went slightly into the protection zone of the sycamore tree. And so we actually pulled that out. John Yaroslavsky redesigned it and was able to pull it back so that there's no encroachment on the sycamore tree. So we've kind of studied this closely. I know Courtney, we went back and forth on the 25% lot development area. So this is like really well designed and really tight. And in discussion with the owner, we feel like the best mitigation for the tree removal would be the in lieu fee. We can't fit 10 oak trees on this property, and we're not really knowledgeable about how the offsite mitigation works. So the in lieu fees seemed like the best solution for this project. I also have Edith Reed, our biologist, available. Greg Zoll, the arborist, and Wayne Chevalier is our architect. He's on here under Studio Bracket. I know there's confusion about that, but Studio Bracket, that's our architect, Wayne. So we're available to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. I just wanted to double check with Gail quickly. I am not seeing anybody from the public. Is that still correct?
Yes, as far as I can tell.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well then we will open this up for ERB member discussion. Marnie and Noah, whoever wants to go first. Or I can pick on you.
Okay.
Okay, Noah. Okay.
Okay, so yes, given the size of this property, it just wouldn't make sense to try to plant 10 oak trees. So I agree that off-site or in lieu fees would be best. And I'll come back to that point in just a second, but I want to point out that across the street in that riparian area, that is a known monarch butterfly overwintering site. So my recommendation would be that the plant palette for the landscaping include as much as possible species that would support that monarch overwintering site, and that would include native plants that have winter nectar, and I can provide a list, and I think I've provided on other projects before as well. I would also recommend, I didn't see it in the plans, but I would just recommend that no milkweed species be used because we're close to an overwintering site and milkweed excites the monarchs out of their overwintering phase.
That's interesting.
So that's my recommendation for the site as far as, so I know we focus a lot on native tree species. There was several non-native tree species cited in the plans, and I think some of those are being removed as well. So some non-native tree species, especially eucalyptus, play a very important role in supporting overwintering monarch habitats due to the fact that, first of all, they provide winter nectar, and also because they provide wind shelter. So I don't know for sure if the trees on your property are providing that service for the habitat, but a consultation with Xerxes, which I can provide a contact for, would help clear that up. And so if those trees are providing wind protection for the monarch site, then maybe we should think about not removing them. Or replacing them with something that would provide the similar service.
So I'm looking at the tree removal plan, just so that you guys know, it looks like a eucalyptus in the middle of the driveway. There's a palm that's gonna be removed, a citrus, a ficus. Let's see, another citrus and a pine and a cypress. So the eucalyptus is where you're concerned?
The eucalyptus is my concern. The cypress, what species of cypress is it? Monterey cypress is known to be used by monarchs, but
It doesn't say what, this is in the landscaping package, so
Okay.
I'm not in the arborist report, I'm in the landscaping package,
so obviously if it's in the middle of the driveway, I don't know if it can be avoided necessarily.
right?
But it's another impact of this project that should be considered. So I don't know if this is possible, but my recommendation would be that the in lieu fees, if possible, be directed toward, Xerxes has a fund for restoration of overwintering habitats in the area. And so if there's a possibility to direct, and those projects often do plant native tree species like oaks as well as part of that restoration. So I don't know if it's possible, but if we can direct those funds to Xerxes, given the proximity to the overwintering habitat, I think that would be cool.
Okay. Okay. I have that written down. Okay, so if possible, direct the in lieu fees towards Xerxes Society, restoration of overwintering habitat. And then specifically, you had comments on the plant palette in the landscaping to support overwintering monarch butterflies as much as possible. And I have your other notes on that. Are those your two main?
Last thing is just kind of a nitpicky thing, not really to do with anything, but in the documents, this is called Sea Level Drive, but it's actually West Sea Level Drive because there's another nearby property with the same address at Sea Level Drive. So just to avoid confusion, this is West Sea Level Drive. Yeah. Okay, that's all I've got.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. Great. Okay, Barney.
I agree with Noah's comments, and I think it would be nice if the plant palette could reflect, could, incorporate more plants that would relate to the overwintering habitat. I do think that eucalyptus and cypress, in such proximity to a residence would be a field mod problem. But certainly, shrubs and perennials that would be useful would be great to incorporate into the plant palette if possible.
Yeah, I think that her suggestion of the in lieu fees is appropriate because they wouldn't, per the code, be allowed to plant eucalyptus and cypress, just based on how small the lot is. So, and the removal, yeah, well, at least what I'm looking at, the removal plan, the eucalyptus is smack dab in the middle of the driveway. So,
Right.
so yeah.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so agree with Noah's comments, and you would like to see the plant palette support more overwintering plant.
Yes, if possible. Many of these plants are non-native. They're lovely, but they're, if you could swap some of them out, it would be great.
Okay. Noah, I don't want to speak for the applicant, but if you do have that resource for plants that you that you suggest for that, I think that would be helpful to send to Rick or the applicant for any revisions, if there are any revisions to the
Sure.
landscape plan. Okay. Are there any other comments on this project? No? Okay. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time and looking at these plans and giving us all of your feedback. I believe that concludes the ERB meeting for October 23rd, 2024. As Gail mentioned earlier, remember we have holidays coming up in November and December. So if there are ERB meetings, they'll be in the third week
Third Wednesday instead of the
won't
4th.
be- Okay, they won't be the week of the holiday, just, yeah. Okay, yes. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Thank you.